There is a story in the Bible that almost feels impossible to understand at first. A man receives a direct command from God. He obeys it. He courageously confronts a king. He witnesses miraculous signs. He refuses a royal reward. He walks away apparently faithful to everything God told him. And then he meets another prophet. The prophet tells him something different. He listens. And before the day is over, he is dead, killed by a lion on the road. But the strangest part of the story is this: the lion does not eat his body, it does not attack his donkey, it simply stands beside the dead prophet, almost as if the scene itself has become a message. This is the disturbing story of the unnamed man of God in 1 Kings chapter 13. And behind this strange account is a warning that is surprisingly relevant today. When God has spoken clearly, even sincere advice from another person cannot replace obedience to him. The story begins during the reign of King Jeroboam, after the kingdom of Israel divided. Jeroboam became king over the northern tribes, but he had a problem. The temple of God was in Jerusalem. Jeroboam feared that if his people continued traveling there to worship, their loyalty might eventually return to the house of David. So he created an alternative system of worship. He made golden calves. He established worship centers at Bethel and Dan, and he appointed priests who were not from the tribe of Levi. It was religion shaped by political fear, and God sent a man to confront it. 1 Kings 13 simply calls him a man of God out of Judah. We are never given his name, but we are told his mission. He traveled from Judah to Bethel carrying a message directly from God. And when he arrived, King Jeroboam was standing beside the altar. The prophet cried out against it. He announced that one day a descendant of David named Josiah would destroy the false worship taking place there. Then he gave them a sign. The altar would split apart, and the ashes upon it would be poured out. Jeroboam was furious. He stretched out his hand toward the prophet and shouted, "Lay hold on him!" But suddenly, the king could not pull his hand back. His hand had withered, and at that same moment, the altar split apart. The ashes poured onto the ground. Everything the man of God had declared happened before their eyes. The king who had commanded the prophet's arrest was now begging him for help. Jeroboam pleaded with him to pray that his hand might be restored. The prophet prayed, and the king's hand became normal again. This unnamed prophet had just demonstrated extraordinary courage. He had stood before a powerful king. He had delivered God's message without compromise. And God had confirmed his words with miraculous signs, but the greatest test of his obedience was still ahead. After his hand was restored, Jeroboam changed his approach. Instead of threatening the prophet, he invited him home. The king said, "Come home with me and refresh thyself, and I will give thee a reward." But the man of God refused. Even if Jeroboam offered him half of everything he owned, he would not go. Why? Because God had given him very specific instructions. He explained, "For so was it charged me by the word of the Lord, saying, Eat no bread, nor drink water, nor turn again by the same way that thou camest." 3 instructions. Do not eat there, do not drink there, and do not return by the same road. The prophet understood perfectly, so he left Bethel by another route. At this point, everything appears successful. Mission accomplished, message delivered, king confronted, miracle performed, royal reward rejected, command obeyed. He had resisted the pressure of a king, but then he encountered someone who appeared far less dangerous, another prophet, and that is where everything changed. There was an old prophet living in Bethel. His sons had witnessed what happened at the altar and told their father everything. When the old prophet heard about the man of God, he immediately went looking for him. Eventually, he found him sitting beneath an oak tree. The old prophet asked, "Art thou the man of God that camest from Judah?" He answered, "I am." Then came the invitation, "Come home with me and eat bread." The man of God refused again. He repeated exactly what God had told him. He could not return. He could not eat bread. He could not drink water in that place. And then the old prophet said something that changed everything. He told him, I am a prophet also, as thou art. And then he claimed that an angel had spoken to him by the word of the Lord. According to the old prophet, God had supposedly changed the instructions. The man of God could now return home with him. He could eat, he could drink, but Scripture immediately reveals the truth, 4 devastating words. But he lied unto him. There had been no angelic message changing God's command. The old prophet was lying, and tragically, the man of God believed him. He returned to Bethel. He sat at the old prophet's table. He ate bread, and he drank water. The man who had refused the command of a king was deceived by the words of a prophet. While they were sitting at the table, something extraordinary happened. The genuine word of the Lord came to the old prophet, and he announced judgment upon the man of God. Because he had disobeyed the command God personally gave him, he would not be buried in the tomb of his ancestors. After the meal, the man of God continued his journey, and somewhere along the road, he encountered a lion. The lion killed him. But then the story becomes even stranger. Travelers later discovered the man's body lying in the road. Beside it stood the lion, and beside the lion stood the prophet's donkey. The lion had not eaten the body. It had not killed the donkey. It simply stood there. Predator, donkey, dead prophet, together beside the road. This was not portrayed as an ordinary animal attack. The unusual scene confirmed the judgment that had been spoken. When the old prophet heard what happened, he immediately understood. He went to retrieve the body. And remarkably, the lion did not attack him either. The old prophet brought the dead man back to Bethel. He mourned over him. He buried him in his own grave. And he cried, "Alas, my brother." This is where the story becomes uncomfortable. The man of God had obeyed so much. He traveled where God told him. He confronted a king. He risked his life. He refused money. He rejected food. He initially refused the old prophet. And yet one act of disobedience cost him his life. Why? Because obedience is not measured only by how much of God's instruction we follow. The man of God did almost everything right, but when another voice contradicted what God had clearly told him, he abandoned the command he knew was from God. That is the tragedy. He did not need new instructions. He already had clear instructions, and perhaps that is why this story remains so powerful. Not every dangerous voice sounds evil. Sometimes it sounds religious. Sometimes it comes from someone older, someone experienced, someone respected, someone who says, "God told me." The man of God recognized the danger when it came from King Jeroboam, but he lowered his guard when it came from another prophet. And that may be one of the greatest warnings in the entire story. The unnamed prophet of 1 Kings 13 remains one of Scripture's most mysterious figures. We never learn his name. We know almost nothing about his life. But his story leaves behind an unforgettable warning. You can be courageous in one moment and careless in the next. You can resist obvious temptation and still be deceived by something that sounds spiritual. You can obey God through the difficult part and stumble when you think the danger has passed. The question is not simply, did I obey God at the beginning? The question is, will I continue obeying him until the assignment is finished? The man of God had God's command. Then another voice came claiming to speak for God. And instead of holding on to what God had clearly told him, he followed the new voice. That road ended beside a lion. And perhaps that is why 1 Kings 13 is preserved for us, not simply as a strange story about a prophet and a wild animal, but as a warning about the danger of partial obedience, because sometimes the greatest test of obedience comes after you have already obeyed. Sometimes the most dangerous voice is not the one openly telling you to reject God. It is the voice telling you that God's clear instruction no longer needs to be taken seriously. So remember the unnamed prophet. Remember the old prophet. Remember the lonely road. And remember the lion standing beside the body. When God has spoken clearly, obedience does not end halfway.